Welcome to the 13th hour, the time when shadows grow long, the veil grows thin, and reality begins to bend. This is where we explore all things paranormal. It's a journey that's part mystery, part entertaining, and always unsettling. So if you're ready, then step beyond the clock face, because the 13th hour starts now.
The Johnson Encounter, Shasta Trinity National Forest, 1989. In September of 1989, the Johnson family set out on a horseback trip deep into Northern California's Shasta Trinity National Forest. This vast wilderness covers more than 2 million acres, jagged peaks, rushing rivers, and towering old-growth pines. It is an ancient land of beauty, but also a land with a reputation. For decades, the Shasta region has been steeped in stories of the unexplained, like UFO sightings, vanished hikers, underground civilizations, and strange creatures. For Donald and Carol Johnson, along with their children, 16-year-old Lucas and 10-year-old June, this was supposed to be nothing more than a late summer family adventure. They hired a seasoned local guide named Hank, a woodsman known for reading the land better than most. The day was perfect. The sun was hot on their shoulders, and the pines swayed above, scattering pine needles along the dirt path. From the tall ponderosa trunks came something unexpected. When the bark warmed in the heat, it released a fragrance like vanilla. Sweet and warm, mixing with the damp ferns and fallen leaves. It felt timeless, almost enchanted, safe. But everything changed around the next bend. 2 forest rangers stood blocking the trail, stretching bright orange safety fencing across the path. Both wore broad campaign hats, their faces shadowed and grim. "What's this?" Hank muttered. The Johnsons stiffened. One of the rangers was Joe, an old friend of Hank's. Hank nudged his horse forward. "Hi, Joe. What's going on here? Why are you blocking the trail?" Joe hesitated, his jaw tight. The other ranger never looked up. Finally, Joe said quietly, "The trail past the lake's open." Hank frowned. "That's a long detour. What's wrong out there?" But Joe gave no answer, only a forced smile and a warning. "Just take the lake route. And Hank, be careful." That guarded look on Joe's face stayed with Hank as he led the Johnsons toward the lake. The trail dipped into heavy shade. Shafts of gold glittered across the water. June gasped when a doe and her fawn stepped into the clearing. But suddenly, the forest exploded. The doe and fawn bolted. A herd followed, bounding through the brush. 2 massive bucks leapt past, antlers flashing. Overhead, birds shrieked and took flight in a frenzy. "What the hell was that?" Lucas shouted. "Watch your mouth," Carol begged nervously. And then, silence. No birds, no frogs, no movement from a forest teeming with life. "That's strange," Carol whispered. "Where did the animals go?" June asked. Hank forced calm into his voice. Sometimes the woods just go quiet. But his gut told him different. He knew something big had scared those animals. "Maybe it was a mountain lion," Lucas exclaimed. June's face turned white. "Now don't you guys worry about anything. Old Hank will keep you safe." Hank pushed aside his flannel shirt and patted his gun holster. "That's what I've got this for." "Cool," Lucas shouted. "Can I shoot it?" Hank raised his eyebrows, considering the possibility. Carol cut in. "Absolutely not." Hank's mouth bent with amusement, and with that, the mood lightened. They reached a meadow where Hank suggested they camped later than he wanted, as twilight was already pressing against the treetops and a chill creeping into the air. "Let's set up quick," Hank urged. The Johnsons worked fast, pitching tents while Hank coaxed a fire to life. Supper was simple but warm. Wood smoke curled into the evening sky as June ate her first campfire s'more. Marshmallow and chocolate smeared across her chin. She giggled, "This is the best thing I've ever eaten!" For a moment, laughter filled the meadow, until the forest cracked wide open. A deafening snap echoed like a gunshot. June grabbed Hank's arm. "What was that?" "Could be a bear," Hank said, though his voice was tight. He banged pots together, the clanging sharp against the night. Then the rocks came. The first stone flew from the dark and struck Hank in the head. Blood streaked down his face before he even realized he'd been hit. "Dad!" Lucas shouted, holding up the bloodied rock. Another stone crashed into Carol's chest. She gasped and fell back, clutching her ribs. As Donald caught her, she cringed in pain. And then came the scream. It ripped through the forest, raw, horrifying. It sounded like a woman being murdered, shrill and saturated with terror. The sound reverberated through the trunks, bouncing back and forth until it felt like the forest itself was screaming. Hank turned to Donald, his face pale in the lantern glow. "Have you ever heard a person scream like that, or growl like that? Whatever's throwing those rocks is at least 10 yards back in the trees. That would take one hell of a strong man to hurl a rock that far." The family huddled together as stones rained around them. Sparks burst as one smashed into the fire pit. And then, silence. Carol's voice broke. "Where's June?" Flashlights cut across the dark. June was gone. Beyond the firelight, the woods loomed endless and black. Donald told his son, "Stay with your mom. Don't leave her side." Lucas nodded, trembling, kneeling by Carol as she clutched her ribs. Hank and Donald pushed into the trees. "Over here," Hank said suddenly. In the dirt, a massive print. Human-like, at least 20 inches long. A deep growl rumbled from ahead. The ground seemed to hum with it, the vibration rising up through their feet, into their bones, settling heavy in their chests. Each growl louder and more terrifying than the next. Wood cracked on the right. Trees shuddered violently, bark splitting. Every hair on Donald's body stood straight up. "No human could do that," Donald whispered. "Looks like there's more than one, too," Hank said anxiously. "There's different size prints, big ones and smaller." They heard another scream. They could tell this one came from June. It sounded far off, but how could that be? She was just at the campfire only minutes ago. The two men pushed deeper into the blackness of the forest. Then it hit them. A thick, suffocating stench. It smelled like wet dog and skunk that had rolled around in rotting animals. The foulness clung to the air, burning their eyes and choking their throats. Donald gagged into his sleeve. "God, do you smell that? Whatever it is, it's close." The forest seemed alive, circling them. More prints appeared in the mud. Shadows flickered between the trees, gone before the beams could catch them. Then Hank's light caught something pale in the dirt. A teddy bear, streaked with mud. Donald snatched it up with shaking hands. "She was here!" A faint cry carried through the dark. Both beams swung toward it, and there she was, June, clinging to a tree trunk at least 20 feet off the ground. Her face was streaked with tears, her small legs trembling as though she might fall at any minute. Another whimper slipped free. "June!" Donald cried. "Hang on, baby! We're here!" But movement stirred below her. A massive shape stepped from the shadows. Its hands closed around the trunk, shaking it violently. June shrieked, clinging desperately. "Leave her alone!" Donald roared. The creature hurled a branch. It smashed directly into Donald, knocking him off his feet and sending him sprawling to the ground with a grunt of pain. He rolled, dazed, clutching his side, but forced himself back up. Another stone followed, whistling past Hank, splintering a tree. Hank fired his gun twice. The beast staggered, clutching its chest. Its eyes glowed with rage, teeth bared, gnashing together in fury. And then it began to advance. It was slow and predatory, but deliberate. Hank raised his gun again, and the creature stopped. Its gaze fixed on the weapon, not confused, but knowing. as if it understood what would happen next if it proceeded. With a roar, it turned and bounded into the dark, vanishing into the trees with unnatural speed. June was halfway down the tree by the time the men could get to her. Donald pulled June into his arms as she slid from the tree, sobbing, clutching her teddy. Hank wrapped them both in a trembling embrace. And that's when Hank saw them. Two faint, glowing green eyes watching them, waiting. The fear was heavy, pressing down on him. Every instinct told Hank to fire, to fight, or run. Those eyes never moved, never blinked. And then, almost as if by decision, the presence in the tree seemed to pull back, fading into the darkness. Hank tightened his grip on June and Donald's shoulder, his chest still pounding. He didn't know why, but deep down, he understood. If they had wanted to kill them, they never would have made it out alive. To this day, the Johnson family has rarely spoken of what they saw in the Shasta Trinity National Forest. Some believe it was a family of Bigfoot. Others say the mountain is a magnet for high strangeness, and anything is possible. Whatever the truth may be, one fact remains. In 1989, something powerful attacked the Johnson family and their guide. And for reasons we may never understand, it chose to let them leave.
The Screaming Woods of Iron Creeks. There's a stretch of land up north near the Shasta Trinity Wilderness where the trees grow too close together and the air never seems to move. Locals call it Iron Creeks, though on any modern map, that name doesn't exist. In the summer of 1986, 4 men went there to work. By the end of the week, 3 were dead, and the 4th was never found. It was supposed to be routine, a 3-day geological survey before fire season. The crew consisted of 2 brothers, David and Mark Wilson, a geologist named Alan Crow, and a radio technician, Jeff Holloway. They drove in with 2 pickup trucks, old Chevy models loaded with equipment. The dirt road wound for miles until it simply gave up and turned to gravel, then dust. From there they hiked. The forest thickened around them, redwoods and firs so tall they felt like walls. The sun dimmed to a greenish haze that never quite reached the ground. Jeff noted that the compass needle jittered every few steps, like the forest itself was made of static. By the time they found a clearing beside the dry creek bed, it was almost dark. They pitched their tents, unpacked the radio equipment, and lit a small fire that barely pushed back the shadows. That first night, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. No crickets, no owls, no wind through the branches. The only sound was the faint hum of Jeff's radio picking up nearby frequencies. He was adjusting the dial when it happened. A low, vibrating sound bled through the static. Not electronic, not mechanical, something deeper. Like a growl pressed through metal. Then, beneath it, words began to form. Go back down. Jeff froze. He played it again. Same phrase, same voice. Alan told him it was interference, maybe a ranger tower catching weather reports. But there were no towers within 50 miles. Morning came with fog so thick it erased the horizon. David left camp to mark survey boundaries and nearly tripped over a footprint in the mud. It was massive, 16 inches long, 6 inches deep, wide enough to fit both his boots inside. 5 toes, but spaced strangely, as though a hand had pressed into the ground instead of a foot.
He followed the impressions for a few yards until they vanished into a tangle of roots and stone. When he looked up, he swore he saw movement, a shape retreating into the mist. Back at camp, Mark took photos, joking about Bigfoot's autograph. But none of them were laughing when they realized the prints were fresh. The edges hadn't even begun to dry. They spent the rest of the day mapping quietly. Every sound, snapping twigs, dripping water, made them flinch. By sunset, they'd built the fire higher than before. That night the air felt charged, the kind of tension before a thunderstorm, though the sky was clear. Jeff sat beside the radio, headphones on, eyes wide. He said he could hear something underneath the static. Breathing. He turned up the volume, and the others leaned in. Through the crackle came faint voices, their own, laughing, talking, repeating things they'd said earlier that day, only wrong, slowed down, stretched. Beneath it was a wet, guttural sound like something breathing along with them. Then came the screaming, human, agonized, echoing. They tore off the headphones. The sound stopped. But somewhere out in the trees, something snapped, a heavy branch breaking under weight. Alan grabbed the flashlight and swept it across the clearing. For a moment, it caught 2 points of reflected light. Dull amber eyes, far too high off the ground. The body behind them shifted. The beam trembled over a wet sheen of fur, slick with rain or blood. They couldn't tell which. David lifted his rifle and fired once. The forest exploded with movement. Something enormous charged through the dark, tearing through branches, slamming into tree trunks with impossible force.
Then silence. They stayed awake till dawn, each man holding something, a flashlight, a shovel, the rifle, watching the edge of the firelight for movement. When the sun finally rose, it brought no comfort. Their gear had been disturbed, tents shifted, crates moved several feet from where they'd been. There were drag marks leading into the trees, as though something had reached in and tried to pull their belongings away during the night. Alan insisted they pack up and leave, but the old trucks were too far down the mountain, and the compass still spun uselessly. They decided to wait for daylight to fully break before hiking out. When they finally tried to hike out, the forest felt wrong. The air had weight to it, pressing down on them, thick and humming like it carried a low electrical charge. Every sound seemed to echo in the wrong direction. The trail that should have led downhill twisted upward, and the creek that ran beside camp now curved away entirely. They were sure they'd hiked several miles towards their trucks, but somehow they'd circled back. The same bent pine, the same pile of stones. Something about the forest made it hard to think straight, like their sense of direction was being pulled apart. The air itself felt alive, aware. Because every time they tried to leave Iron Creek, the forest brought them right back. The men, exhausted from no sleep the night before and their endless miles walking in circles, finally decided to stay at their camp that night. At 7, Jeff checked the radio again, maybe out of habit, maybe to feel normal. The static was back, but something in it was changing. This time, it wasn't voices, it was sound, mimicry. The call of birds, the wind, even Alan's cough, all echoing back seconds later, slightly warped, like something repeating the world as it heard it. Then, layered under it, came whispering. Not words at first, just a breath. Then, clearer. You shouldn't have stayed. That evening, the fog thickened again. The men huddled close to the fire, no one speaking. The woods around them groaned and shifted, like something moving inside the trees themselves. At some point past midnight, Mark said he saw a shadow standing between two fir trunks, tall, bent, half-human. He blinked, and it was gone. Then the radio clicked on by itself. Their voices came through again, this time calling out for one another. Alan, David, Jeff, each name repeated in a different pitch. They could hear movement, branches breaking, something circling them closer each time. Jeff whispered, "It's copying us." A hand hit the tent wall from the outside, leaving a dark smear of mud across the canvas. Something enormous moved past, breathing hard enough to shake the air. The fire flared, then died. The next sound was screaming. 3 days later, search and rescue found what was left of their camp. Tents ripped open, sleeping bags dragged several yards away. The trees around the site leaned inward, bark stripped from one side as if something had pushed against them. They found David, Mark, and Alan. Their bodies were torn, but not eaten, as if clawed, then left. Each bore deep scratches along the shoulders, like finger marks that ended abruptly at the neck. Jeff Holloway was never found. The radio equipment was smashed, but one tape survived. It began with heavy breathing, then Jeff's voice shaking. He said, "It's in the trees. It's learning us." Then came a burst of static, a thud, branches breaking, and finally, in that same deep, distorted tone as before, "You shouldn't have stayed." The tape ended there. Rangers closed off the site, citing soil instability and erosion hazards. But locals still whisper about the place. They call it the Screaming Woods. Some say that on still nights, if you stand near the old Iron Creek Road, you can hear radio static drifting between the trees, faint like it's searching for a frequency. Others swear they've heard voices calling for help. The strangest stories come from hikers who swear the voices sound familiar. Sometimes, they say, it's their own.
They find Bobby Carver's pickup 3 days after he's supposed to come down from the mountains. It sits just off the service road, half buried in pine needles, headlights still cutting through the trees like two dull eyes that refuse to blink. The motor still idles, soft, uneven, like it's been breathing to itself in the dark. Inside are the remains of a trip frozen in time, a thermos half full, a folded map jammed between the seat and console, and the smell of old coffee, gun oil, and pine. The passenger door hangs open just a crack, as if someone has stepped out with the promise of returning in a minute and never did. That's when they find the man who does come back. Eddie Langford stumbles down the road barefoot, face cut, shirt torn. He doesn't look at anyone, doesn't look at the truck. He just keeps walking, eyes locked on the forest behind him. When the sheriff tries to stop him, Eddie says one thing over and over. It wasn't a bear. Later, in hospital room, washed pale by fluorescent light, Eddie tells his story. He and Bobby have gone up Marble Creek for a 3-day elk trip. Bobby is a guide, a quiet man, good at reading the woods, the kind of person who can point at a bent blade of grass and tell you what passed through hours ago. The plan is simple. Follow the creek, make camp at the ridge, and glass the clearings come dawn. They park at the end of an old logging spur, the gate rusted, the signs shot through, and the forest thick around the road like it's reclaiming what's its own. Eddie remembers the air, heavy with cedar and cold iron, like rain waiting somewhere out of sight. They hike until the sound of the creek folds into the trees and the world turns the color of moss. That night, they build a small fire. Sparks float into the branches like dying stars. They laugh, talk about nothing. For a while, it feels safe. The firelight makes the woods seem smaller. Then the sound comes. It starts like a scream, but it isn't a mountain lion, not this deep, not this long. It begins low and climbs, building until it fills the night with something too big for lungs, too heavy for air. It echoes across the ridge like metal dragged across stone. When it stops, the forest doesn't resume. It just waits. And then comes the smell: wet fur, spoiled meat, damp earth. Bobby says it's a cat, but his voice doesn't sound like he believes it. He tamps out the fire and says they'll move on at first light. Morning comes gray and cold. They break camp and push deeper into the drainage, following the slope where the ferns bow toward the water. Around mid-morning, they find the tracks. Not boot prints, bare feet. Each one too long. The toes, thick and wide, spaced unnaturally far apart. Eddie kneels beside one. He could fit both his boots inside a single print. Barefoot hiker, Bobby mutters. But the word barefoot hangs in the air like something fragile. They keep walking. By late afternoon, the forest begins to throw things. Small at first, a pebble, a nut, a bit of bark. Then heavier. A round stone cracks against a cedar trunk and splits. "Hey!" Bobby yells into the trees. "Knock it off!" The woods don't answer. They just listen. Something shifts beyond the brush, not running, but pacing. Eddie swears he sees a shadow move between the trees, wide at the shoulders, gliding like smoke. By sundown, Bobby's tone changes. He says, "We're heading back at first light. Something's wrong in this drainage. No elk, no birds. Just wrong." That night, they don't light a fire. They sit in the dark, the nylon of the tent slick with dew. Every sound feels too close. Every breath sounds too loud. Sometime past midnight, the ground starts to move. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, the kind that carry weight without hurry. Bobby unzips the tent and raises his flashlight. The beam sweeps the trees, catching rain-wet bark and mist. And then, eyes. 2 golden discs blink back higher than a man's reach. They don't glow. They reflect, cold, steady, alive. "Bear," Bobby whispers, but his voice trembles. A growl rolls through the clearing, low and deep, like thunder trapped in a chest. It isn't angry. It sounds tired. Then the steps retreat. The forest closes around them again. Neither man speaks. By dawn, their coolers overturned, their food gone, the rope frayed, not cut, but twisted apart. Half their gear is missing, including Bobby's second boot. They pack what's left and start downriver. But something's different. The orange tape Bobby tied on their way up is gone, torn down. And in one place, it's been retied higher, out of reach. By mid-morning, they hear the knocks. 2 sharp strikes, wood on wood. Bobby freezes. "That's my rhythm," he says. Eddie blinks. "What?" He says, "I hit a tree this morning with my stick. 3 knocks, 1 after. This is 2. It's answering." The forest goes still. Then another knock. Closer. They run. They climb until the trees open into a granite overlook. The valley sprawls below, silver and distant. For a heartbeat, they think they're safe. Then silence falls again. No birds, no wind, no whisper of branches. The forest has drawn a curtain. The scream comes like a wave, shaking the air, shoving against their ribs. It isn't just sound, it's pressure. Eddie drops to one knee, hands over his ears. Bobby raises his rifle, finger frozen on the trigger. "You don't shoot what you can't see," he whispers. Then the movement starts. Not the sudden burst of an animal, but the slow rearranging of the forest itself. A shape moves between the trees, massive, dark, deliberate. Eddie swears he sees a shoulder turn, hair slick with rain, the hint of a face that knows exactly where they stand. And then it's gone. They run downhill, slipping through mud and roots until the forest blurs into streaks of green and gray. Eddie falls hard into a gully, his head cracking against stone. When he wakes, fog clings to everything, like breath on glass. The air feels heavy, wrong. "Bobby!" he shouts. "Bobby!" Nothing answers. He blows his whistle. The sound doesn't echo. It just dies. Then, from the slope above, one knock. Pause. One more. The smell follows. Wet fur, rot, iron. And then breathing. Deep, measured, close. Eddie runs. He runs until his lungs burn, until the world tilts. He stumbles into a clearing, moonlight spilling like milk across the grass, and collapses beside a fallen log. The forest around him stirs with movement. Something circles just beyond the tree line, its steps slow, deliberate. Then it appears. Tall, 8, maybe 9 feet. Hair dark and matted, shoulders broad as a doorway. Its face is too human to be animal, too wrong to be human. The eyes don't shine, they absorb the light. It exhales, and the air itself seems to shift. Then it tilts its head. Eddie whispers, "Please don't." The creature looks past him, toward the trees, and makes a sound between a bark and a grunt. From somewhere deeper in the woods, another voice answers. 2 short calls, almost like words. Then it's gone. When Eddie looks up again, he's alone. By morning, he finds Bobby's pack half buried near the creek. The straps are torn, but the pockets are neatly opened as if someone or something was curious, not hungry. Inside are the broken GPS, a handful of rifle rounds, and Bobby's knife. Farther down, in the mud, 2 sets of prints wait side by side. One is a boot tread, the other bare, enormous, perfect. The human tracks end at the river. The larger ones walk straight into the current and disappear. Eddie screams Bobby's name until his voice breaks. Nothing answers. That night, he climbs a tree, lashes himself to a branch, and waits for dawn. Something moves below, circling, testing the trunk. He doesn't sleep. He finds the truck by accident, metal glinting through the underbrush like a coin in the mud. The keys sit in the ignition. The engine turns over on the first try. He drives until the trees thin, until he sees light again. He pulls into town, parks crooked across 2 spaces, and steps out. The first words out of his mouth: "It wasn't a bear." 12 days. Drones, dogs, deputies. They find Bobby's rifle planted barrel down in the dirt, the stock upright like a gravestone. No blood. No tracks. A week later, someone spots something hanging from a cedar 30 feet up. Bobby's missing boot. Laces tied, sole facing down. Other trees in the area have their bark rubbed smooth, 8 feet up, higher in some places, as though something massive has been scratching its back. A deputy later admits off record that he hears a 2-note whistle in the fog, high, then low, but leaves it out of the report. The official statement reads, "No foul play, no confirmed animal. Case open." 2 years pass. Most forget about Iron Ridge. Until a Forest Service worker radios in from Marble Creek. He's found a campsite, tent flattened, fire still smoking. Next to it, a single barefoot print pressed deep into the mud. Before he can photograph it, rain starts to fall. By the time the others arrive, the print is gone. He swears the volume on his radio turned down by itself while he took the picture, not bumped, turned. He transfers to another district the next morning. Eddie never guides again. He sells his gear, moves away, refuses interviews. When someone asks why he won't tell his story on camera, he just says quietly, "Because it's still out there, and it knows I talked." He dies 20 years later, never setting foot in the woods again. But on the night he passes, his neighbor wakes to 2 faint sounds outside her house. Knock. Knock. Like someone rapping gently on wood. The forest hums with life when the Carters arrive. Pine needles whisper under the tires as their SUV climbs the last curve of the dirt road. The cabin appears between the trees, an old log structure, half swallowed by the woods, its porch sagging slightly, its windows catching the late afternoon light like amber eyes. They step out, stretching, laughing, taking in the cold mountain air. The father, Mark, calls it perfect. The mother, Elise, says it smells like rain and sap and clean air. The kids, Tyler and Emma, race ahead toward the porch, where old wind chimes clatter lazily in the breeze. Inside, the cabin smells like pine resin and wood smoke. Dust motes float in the amber light spilling through the curtains. There's a stone fireplace, old quilts, and the faint ticking of something deep inside the walls. By evening, the forest has gone still. Dinner is simple. Chili bubbling on the stove, the hiss of oil, the faint crackle of the fire. Outside the windows, the world beyond the porch is nothing but black and reflection. Then, a sound. A snap. Not the light brittle crack of a twig, but the sharp report of something heavy breaking. They freeze. Forks hover in midair. Mark stands, peers through the window. "Probably a deer," he mutters. But even as he says it, the forest feels wrong. Too still, too expectant. Minutes pass. The tension fades. Tyler laughs again. Then the first thud hits the wall. It's low, solid, like the swing of a hammer against timber. The plates rattle. A picture frame trembles. Another thud. Then another. Each one heavier than the last. The fire flickers, the glass in the window vibrates. Elise grips the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "Earthquake?" she whispers. But the shaking isn't from below, it's from outside. Something's hitting the cabin. Mark grabs the rifle from above the mantel, the one he barely remembers how to use. The pounding moves around them, from wall to wall, circling the cabin. Boom! The door rattles violently in its frame. Boom! Dust falls from the rafters. Tyler screams. Emma covers her ears. Elise pulls them toward the hallway. A deep growl rolls through the woods, so low it vibrates in their chests. The dog starts barking from under the couch, then stops, tail tucked, whimpering. Another blow. This one so hard, the lampshade tips, the bulb bursts, and the room plunges into half-darkness. "Who's out there?" Mark shouts. The only answer is a long, rasping exhale, like breath against the wall. They hear heavy footsteps, crunching snow. Then, silence. They barely breathe. Minutes stretch into hours. Every sound feels amplified. The pop of the fire, the slow creak of settling wood, the heartbeat in their ears. Finally, the world outside goes still again. The first gray light seeps through the windows. Mark opens the door slowly, rifle trembling in his hands. The morning air bites, cold. The clearing is empty. The trees stand silent, but the forest floor is torn. Deep prints in the mud, enormous and wide. The side of the cabin is shredded. Splintered wood hangs loose, gouged in thick, ragged lines that reach halfway up the wall, far above any human reach. Elise steps out behind him, holding Emma close. Her voice shakes. "Bear?" Mark doesn't answer. He just stares at the prints, each one pressed deep, surrounded by melted frost. The shape is wrong, too long, too human. He turns slowly, eyes following the line of the woods, where the fog still clings between the trees. For a heartbeat, he swears he sees something move, a shadow sliding behind the pines, tall and slow. Then it's gone. The birds haven't started singing yet. The air feels empty, drained. Inside, the kids cling to each other, whispering questions no one can answer. Elise touches the splintered logs, her fingers tracing the gouges. The wood is sticky with sap, and something darker. Mark looks up again, toward the tree line. Whatever came in the night was strong enough to shake the house, smart enough to circle it, and tall enough to reach the roof. They pack by noon, and the forest watches them go. It's just past midnight when the radio crackles. Deputy Mark Hensley sits alone in the tiny Pine Hollow Sheriff's substation, a cup of stale coffee cooling beside a half-written report. It's been a slow night, until the voice on dispatch comes through. Unit 4-3, respond to 1912 Millers Ridge Road. Caller reports screaming. Female voice. Ongoing. Mark straightens. Copy that, 4-3 en route. The dispatcher hesitates before continuing. Be advised, caller says it's coming from the woods, not the house. Claims it sounds like a woman being attacked. The static stretches a beat too long. Mark grabs his keys and heads out into the cold. The cruiser hums down the forest road, headlights sweeping across walls of cedar and mist. No houses, no cell towers, just the rhythmic hiss of tires on wet gravel and the occasional cry of wind through trees. He checks the dash cam, recording light on. Radio, intermittent. Every few seconds the signal dies in white noise. He turns down the narrow lane marked Miller's Ridge. The GPS loses connection. The road dips into darkness. A soft glow appears ahead, porch light maybe. He rounds the bend and spots a cabin nestled in a clearing, smoke curling from the chimney. An SUV idles in the gravel drive, headlights still on. The front door opens before he even reaches the porch. Janet Pierce, mid-40s, flannel robe, pale as chalk, clutches a cordless phone to her chest. "Thank God," she breathes. "I thought you weren't coming." Mark tips his hat. "Ma'am, you're the one who called about a scream?" She nods quickly. "It started about 20 minutes ago. I thought it was an animal, but then it started talking." She lowers her voice. It sounded like a woman, begging, calling for help. He studies the tree line. You see anyone out there? She shakes her head. No lights, no cars, just the voice. He steps off the porch and scans the yard with his flashlight. The beam cuts through fog and finds tracks in the mud. Bare feet, deep impressions, long stride. The size of them makes his stomach tighten. He tries his radio. Static, no connection. Ma'am, stay inside, he says, hand hovering near his holster. Lock the door behind me. The forest swallows him whole. The crunch of gravel fades behind him, replaced by the soft hiss of mist against leaves. The beam of his flashlight trembles slightly as he pans it across the underbrush. Then he hears it. A scream. High, raw, human. Help me! The voice rips through the dark. Female, terrified. Somewhere ahead. Mark bolts forward. Branches snap across his jacket. His breath steams. The voice echoes again, closer this time, shuddering with panic. Please, somebody help! He raises the flashlight and freezes. The sound stops mid-word. Everything goes silent. Even the crickets. Mark's pulse hammers. He swings the light through the fog. Sheriff's office, he calls out. You need help? No answer. Only his own breath, ragged and loud in his ears. Then, another voice. Lower. Not words, but something mimicking them. A distorted version of the same scream, stretched and broken. Please, help! The beam lands on a tree trunk. Something wet glistens behind it. He steps closer, heart pounding. A shape moves, a head, a shoulder, rising slowly from behind the tree. The flashlight catches the side of a face, dark hair matted with rain, skin gray-brown under the light, eyes reflecting a dull amber glow. The thing's mouth opens and the scream comes again, the same woman's voice, perfectly imitated. Mark stumbles back, hand going for his gun. Stay where you are, he shouts. The figure steps into view. It's enormous, 8 feet tall, fur slick with moisture, chest heaving. Its arms hang almost to its knees. It stares at him with something that isn't quite animal curiosity, something that feels deliberate. He fires once into the air. The crack splits the night. The thing jerks back, then lets out a sound that isn't a roar, isn't human, somewhere in between. From behind it, the forest answers. Another voice, then another. Branches snap, movement everywhere. Mark backs toward the cabin, keeping the light forward, but shadows move between the trees faster than ye can follow. Something huge darts across the beam, gone in a blur. Then silence again. Thick, heavy, waiting. He turns, sprinting back through the clearing. Janet meets him on the porch, eyes wide. What was that? She screams. Inside, he orders. They slam the door, lock it, kill the lights. The only sound is Janet's breathing and the faint tick of the wood stove. From the woods comes a single knock, then another. Wood on wood. Like something hitting a tree. Janet whispers, What are they doing? Mark doesn't answer. He's staring at the window because something just moved past it. Something tall enough that its shoulders brush the eaves. Dawn comes slow and gray. Backup finally reaches the ridge just after sunrise. The forest looks ordinary again. Quiet. They find tracks, bare, huge, deep enough to fill with water. They circle the cabin and disappear into the timber. Mark files the report as unconfirmed disturbance. He doesn't mention the voice, or the shape, or the eyes. But that night, reviewing his dashcam footage, he freezes on the last few seconds before the screen cuts to static. There's a reflection in the cruiser's headlights, two figures at the edge of the road just beyond the light's reach, and in the faint hum of the radio, a voice whispers, familiar, distorted, almost human. "Help me."